I think that this movie falls into the greatest year, I would say the last great year that we had of movies, which was in 2007. In 2007, we had The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. We had There Will Be Blood and No Country for Old Men. I don't fully know what it is about those three movies coming out in that same year that makes it's just it is a feeling, and I want to do a video about this later on, but that most definitely was, I think, the last year where Hollywood put out a series of movies that was just so powerful that even today we still feel like they're fresh. So I'll make it very plain to start off with. I love There Will Be Blood. I'll be breaking down what it is exactly that makes There Will Be Blood so poignant. And after the, I guess, 15 years now since its release, it's still so poignant. But to start with, I think it's important to recognize Paul Thomas Anderson, the writer-director who before that was known for much more, I would say, upbeat, while still depressing, very upbeat, energetic movies. The camera's always moving, the characters are always talking, there's lots of dialogue, the soundtrack is constantly flicking on and off between different types of songs, the energy is just constantly bouncing off the walls with lots of people saying lots of different things, tons of cast members, a lot of ensemble work. His first movies, things like Hard Eight, Magnolia, Punch Drunk Love, Boogie Nights, very much inspired by Robert Altman, Martin Scorsese, things like Casino. The camera's constantly whizzing around. And then after Punch Drunk Love, nothing from Paul Thomas Anderson for half a decade. And then we get There Will Be Blood. And if you look at this movie compared to the rest of his career before that, this is very slow moving. The camera is very methodical in its placement, in its movement. The score also, while before it always felt like there was this kinetic energy bouncing off the walls, this one is almost surgical in the way that it's trying to break into your psyche. There's a lot of anxiety building that's going on throughout this movie. And while the actual technical style, the sound, the camera movement, is much more diverse than what he had made before, the largest departure is in the way that he's experimental with the actual narrative itself. Now, Paul Thomas Anderson had been experimental before in a way, I would say more in a way that you could just describe as quirky. There was always an objective that the character had, something that they very clearly wanted. You know, if you start from point A, in the end, you want to get to point B. And the way that they got there was always very eclectic, and that was kind of what made his style unique. It was what made his style his style. And when we get to There Will Be Blood, we get a much different type of storytelling. Daniel Plainview is a character who we don't really get to know so much as something that we just have to experience his life alongside him. There is no real point A or point B for Daniel Plainview. But the thing that makes it, and I do really mean revolutionary, is that throughout the whole movie, you do really feel like you are being forcefully propelled towards an objective. But by the end of it, there is no real objective that you reach. And then when you look back at it, there was never really a clearly stated objective that you were ever trying to get to at any point throughout the movie. It's really just an obsession with work and with toiling and with the experience of just being in the mud and the muck and the business and the grime, and the movie revels in that, and it revels in the character's enjoyment of that. Now, I want to talk about why I think the movie has lasted in people's minds as long as it has. When the movie first came out, there was a very flippant, I think, criticism that was pretty much saying, There Will Be Blood is a story about capitalism. I hate whenever critics say that a movie is about capitalism. That's just it just feels so easy. I think what's going on in There Will Be Blood, it is a story about spirituality in the Paul Dano character fighting against nature in the Daniel Plainview character. Now, I don't think that the movie is actually trying to put this forward. I think that the movie is so powerful that if you dig into it, you kind of see that these are different things that are going on. Look at the Daniel Plainview character. He is someone who is wholly ambitious. He is pretty much just the embodiment of ambition. This is something that Paul Thomas Anderson has throughout all of his characters. All of his characters are the main characters are very ambitious to a degree that kind of destroys them. And you then have the Sunday character, and he's ambitious in the same way, but he's ambitious in a way that is much more geared towards spirituality. But focusing on our main character, Daniel Plainview, it digs deep into what he is actually about. But throughout the entire movie, when you watch it again and again and again, you sense that there's this emptiness inside of him. While he's very serious, he takes things incredibly seriously. You can tell that he is the smartest person in the room. But at the same time, by the end of the movie, you feel like he never really had anything to begin with. And I think that the power of There Will Be Blood comes from creating such a vibrant character. And you have Daniel Day-Lewis to thank for that. You have Paul Thomas Anderson to thank for that in writing this character. It's such a perfect creation of the character. And what the movie does is it doesn't moralize him at all. It sticks by his side throughout the entire movie. The movie is literally showing you the world the way that he sees it. And that makes us very uncomfortable because there are many times throughout the movie where we see the world through his eyes, and his worldview is a pretty ugly one. And whenever his adversary, Sunday, shows up, we see that there is an equally strong force that is fighting against him. And while the two men are still very corrupt, and I think there is something going on here, and I think it's a powerful thing to set this movie in the early 1900s around oil. And I think there's an important thing about, it's called There Will Be Blood. It's set around an industry that at the time they have an understanding that this is the future, but us watching it today, we know it's a future in the way that they never could. There's something very biblical going on about everything that is happening here. And by that, it means that it's an epic. It's very much an epic. You have a force of Daniel Plainview, who I do honestly think represents nature, but not knowingly so. And then you have Sunday, who represents spirituality, the good and bad that comes with both of them. And they have to fight and they have to war with each other, but the movie is not trying to moralize about any of that. I think that this is one of those rare movies where it is just a perfect combination of nuance. The good and the bad that comes through spirituality, through nurture, and then the good and the bad that comes through nature. Just brute force pushing forward into the world with all its might. And it's an intoxicating watch. You have incredible performers playing this out. Again, in a point of history that would have been the turning point after the last maybe 500 years, this revolutionary type of technology. We're mining for oil, like the thing that is propelling humanity into the future. It's just on the level of character, on the level of culture, on the level of messaging, on the level of style, it gets everything right all the time. And the best thing I think about Paul Thomas Anderson and what he does is that there's not necessarily, and this is something that Martin Scorsese talks about, there's plot and then there's story. Whenever you have plot, you're going from this happened today, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then that happened, and then at the end of the day, you see just a whole combination of a message, and we have this, a takeaway from everything, and this was the reformation of the character. But a story is really more an experience, kind of putting yourself in the shoes of someone and experiencing life the way that they do. And then at the end of it, it kind of leaves it open-ended for you to kind of take away what it is that you will. And I think this is really a story about corruption and loneliness because you follow someone who is so much just a brute force of nature. And there's an emptiness inside of them, but the character is crafted so well that it feels like there's something more going on. And the thing that resonates so well, at least for me, is that when watching it back, you are intoxicated by how powerful Daniel Plainview's will is just to push himself forward, but you're perplexed by how empty everything is in the meantime. And throughout the whole thing, you're not feeling like it's moralizing in any way about anything. It's really just focusing on good storytelling, which is something that Hollywood has not focused on doing, I think, for a long time. And yeah, on the technical side, there's so much good in here. There's the brother that comes into play, which feeds into Daniel Plainview kind of being harkened back to maybe being more of a person, but he has to just reject it. There's the explosion that happens. Everything with his son, with HW, feeds into this. It's like there's a paradox with his son. Does he love his son? Does he hate his son? Does he just use his son as kind of like a pawn? And every single time, especially at the end of the movie, whenever we see HW, we almost can't understand why Daniel Plainview is doing anything that he's doing. the baptism scene. It's kind of like whenever Sunday and Daniel Plainview go head to head. It's an incredible scene as the two of them kind of fight each other for who is going to win at the end of the day. Is it going to be the people that kind of push forward into the new world, or is it going to be the people that have, existed in this world, the spiritual side that's existed in this world for thousands of years, trying to find their place in the new world? Just everything about this movie, it's a strange thing. It's a strange, I think, feeling of not knowing your place, but it sets a story about not knowing your place at one of the most pivotal times in civilization that it does. It gives it this quality, and I think that's where the title There Will Be Blood comes from. In life, there is just a churn that destroys so much, and that destruction is so necessary to bring forth the oil. And I think it's a great title. I think it's a great story. I think it's a great movie because there is so much that rings true when watching this movie, but so much of it feels like sand sifting through your fingers. You can see it and you can feel it, but you almost can't get a hold of it. And it's just a great movie to rewatch. Honestly, this is, I think there was, I forget who named it, what publication named it one of the top 10 movies of the 2000s, but there was a point where Paul Thomas Anderson said that the best movie he was going to make is Magnolia, and honestly, I think Magnolia is his worst movie. And while I think Phantom Thread is competitive for his best, I think if you're going to put your money down for his filmography, the one that most people would say that is the greatest movie that person ever created, it's got to be There Will Be Blood. There Will Be Blood is a classic. If you haven't seen it, check it out. What are your thoughts on There Will Be Blood? Please leave your thoughts in the comments. And as always, please subscribe to 5 Minute Critic for future updates on reviews and movie news.